The year is 1242. The place, Lake Peipus, between modern-day Estonia and Russia. There, amid these vast frozen waters, a battle is about to take place. On one side, the army of the Russian Republic of Novgorod, led by the 21-year-old Alexander Nevsky, a courageous young warrior prince, just recalled from exile in time to defend his people. On the other side, the Livonian branch of the Teutonic Knights, fierce warrior monks arrayed in heavy armor atop their powerful war horses. The Teutonic Knights are the main muscle of the Northern Crusades, Latin Christendom's project to subdue and convert the pagan peoples of the Baltic. But today, the enemy they're facing is also Christian, though of a different rite. Alexander and his people are Eastern Orthodox. The battle that's about to take place represents more than a clash between two competing powers. It's a contest between Western and Eastern Christianity. The outcome will determine which of the two will hold sway in this region. Since 1217, the Teutonic Knights have been engaged in a long war to subdue the pagan tribes of Prussia. Recently, their influence has expanded. In 1237, Pope Gregory IX dissolves another order of fighting monks, the Sword Brothers, whose lands in Livonia he grants to the Teutonic Knights. This increases the domain of the Teutonic Order in the Baltic and effectively puts them in control of the Northern Crusades. But Pope Gregory IX wants something in return: help with his latest project, a crusade against the Russians. The expansion of Teutonic power in the Baltic has not gone unnoticed by the nearby Russian Republic of Novgorod. Previously, Novgorod had exercised hegemonic dominion over the Lets and the Estonians, both of whom are now ruled by the Westerners. This leads to border clashes between Novgorodian and Western armies. Initially, the Pope thinks to remedy the issue by sending missionaries to Novgorod, but the Russians are not interested in converting to Latin Christianity. Things heat up in 1234 when Prince Yaroslav leads a Novgorodian army on a raiding expedition that devastates the Latin mission in Finland. After this attack, Pope Gregory IX decides he's done sending missionaries. He dispatches a papal legate to the Teutonic Knights with instructions to organize a crusade to conquer Novgorod. The Teutonic Order is not exactly eager to take on another war. Their numbers are stretched thin, manning the castles of Livonia and waging regular campaigns to hold and expand their territory in Prussia. But 1240 seems like the ideal time for the Westerners to strike. Civil conflict plagues Novgorod. Prince Alexander is battling for control with other Russian princes. After defeating an attack from Sweden, Alexander is exiled by his own subjects. Meanwhile, the Teutonic Knights advance into Novgorodian territory. In September, they occupy Izborsk and Pskov. By early 1241, they capture Wad and Ingria, the territory between Novgorod and the Finnish Gulf. The citizens of Novgorod, alarmed by this invasion, beg their exiled prince to resume power and lead the defense. Alexander Nevsky answers the call and assumes command. Initially, Alexander leads a small force to disrupt the Teutonic Knights' occupation of Novgorod's western frontier. He expels the garrison at Wad and occupies all the roads right up to Pskov. He even penetrates into the Latin diocese of Dorpat. But a contingent of Western Knights, under Bishop Hermann of Dorpat, routs the Novgorodians and forces Alexander to retire. Bishop Hermann is one of the most important magnates in Livonia, as much prince as bishop. With the Teutonic Order, he assembles an army to challenge Alexander's counterattack. Meanwhile, Alexander gathers the forces of Novgorod to oppose them. It is April 1242. When the Western and Eastern armies stand face to face at Lake Peipus. As it is his territory being invaded, Alexander is able to select the site of the encounter. Alexander understands that the greatest weapon of the Teutonic Order is the charge of their heavily armored mounted knights. He believes that the vast frozen lake will blunt the effectiveness of this charge, giving the edge to his forces, which are larger in number. Bishop Hermann and the Teutonic Knights lead a force of perhaps 2,500, all they were able to spare, without compromising their positions in Livonia and Prussia. The largest portion of their army is made up of around 1,000 Estonian infantry. Bishop Hermann leads a few hundred German and Danish mounted knights. Only around 100 heavily armored brother knights of the Livonian branch of the Teutonic Order are present, though they are the army's most formidable element. On the other side of the lake, Alexander is at the head of around 5,000 troops. On his flanks, he positions his own cavalry retinue, Novgorod's most prized warriors. The center is made up primarily of Novgorod's militia troops, as well as Alexander's own infantry. To the right, he places a small contingent of horse archers. Alexander establishes his army in a solid formation and awaits the advance of the enemy. Bishop Hermann begins the battle by ordering a cavalry charge, with which he hopes to break the Russian center. The heavy Western Knights form the spearhead of a column bolstered by light cavalry and infantry. Initially, this charge inflicts severe casualties on the Russian vanguard. But as the lighter Western forces advance to bolster their heavy cavalry, the Russian center holds. The fighting is brutal, with infantry on both sides sustaining heavy casualties. However, Alexander's own elite cavalry has been kept in reserve on the flanks. Alexander now leads his knights in a pincer movement, which envelops the numerically inferior Western forces. The Westerners break in disordered retreat, and Alexander's knights devastate the Estonian infantry. Most of the brother knights escape, with only around 20 falling in battle. The victory belongs to Alexander and Novgorod. The Crusade is defeated, the invasion halted. Novgorod will not fall under Latin rule. Alexander has no interest in pursuing the Westerners into their own territory. His only concern is to remove the threat to Novgorod. He's just won a great victory, but the Teutonic Knights have suffered small losses, which can easily be replenished. The position of the Westerners in Livonia and Prussia remains strong. Thus, Alexander opens negotiations. He presents the Teutonic Order with generous terms, which the brother knights quickly accept. Alexander withdraws from Pskov and other border territories. Both sides free their prisoners. A truce agreeable to both is established. In the long term, the outcome was probably beneficial to the Teutonic Order. The Pope had to accept that the conquest of Novgorod was impossible, and the brother knights no longer had to expend resources toward that end. Instead, the order came to an understanding with Prince Alexander that left them free to pursue their domination of Livonia and Prussia. The truce was also beneficial to Alexander, who wanted to focus on countering the threat of the Mongols from the east. The battle on the ice has become legendary. In 1938, the Russian-language film Alexander Nevsky presented a heavily fictionalized version of the battle, which was more influenced by 20th century politics than historical reality. The film grossly overplays the differences between the quality of the arms and armor of the two sides, portraying the Novgorodians almost as 20th century peasants engaged in a communist-style uprising against an elitist Teutonic Order. The true Alexander Nevsky has become a hero in Russian history, and his stellar performance at the battle on the ice is a key factor in his position of high esteem.